It's over, Anakin! I have the high ground!
Hey, buddy, watch this.
Hey folks, we've got some custom Star Wars cards to talk about, including some staples like Vader and Boba Fett, and some prequel characters as well. You guys really like the prequels. Before we get into it, I do want to mention this video is sponsored by our friends at Keeps, which we'll talk about a little later, but for now, let's jump into the cards. Up first here, we have our friend Boba Fett from Faroon, a 5-mana 5/5 rush for Rogue. Overkill, return this minion to your hand and add a coin to your hand. So I love this idea here of a bounty hunter who's out completing bounties. You get your reward, which is a coin. You come back and you get ready for your next bounty. And for Rogue, of course, generating coins can be something they love to do. Great combo activators. Miracle Rogue might enjoy those sorts of things. And in particular, this just gives you a resource that you can keep replaying. But of course, it's hard sometimes to get this to actually successfully overkill because your opponent might start playing stuff that's a little bit too big. But Rogue has those backstabs and seal fates and cards that can soften up things before Boba Fett comes in for the killing blow. But I like this idea of capturing a bounty hunter really perfectly here. And I think this would be a fun card for Rogue and a great way to capture the character. Next up here, we have the Trooper's Blaster from Arahan, and quite a few people submitted mechanics or ideas really similar to this one. We even have another one in the video, but I thought this one captured it really well. It's a 4-mana 5/2 weapon for Warrior, and it has a 100% chance to attack the wrong enemy. So we've seen before weapons that had a 50% chance to attack the wrong enemy, the Ogre style, that made it, feel random. But this one's really cool strategically, right? So if there are, say, like 2 enemies on board, 1 minion and your opponent's face, if you want to deal face damage, you just attack the minion, and you still have some degree of control. But as you move up to like 5 enemies on board, suddenly the chaos starts to ensue, and that creates the downside that makes this card reasonable, because otherwise, of course, its stat line is really powerful. But that's also cool for things like taunt. If there's a taunt in the way and you want to deal face damage, you just attack the taunt minion, and maybe you get to go face. If there's not enough minions out there, you're guaranteed to go face. So all in all, I think this one has some really neat gameplay implications. Also, just, of course, a great way to make fun of the fact that stormtroopers have absolutely terrible aim. Moving on here to a ridiculous card that I absolutely love. This one's from PVT. It's the Pod Racer Engine, a 3-mana 0/4 mech. It reads, if an adjacent minion has this and another Pod Racer Engine next to it, give that minion charge. Which, I mean, that's 6 mana basically, as you can see, to give a minion charge. That's not very good. I think this card is trash from like a gameplay standpoint. I don't know how you'd ever use this successfully in a competitive deck, but the idea is so hilarious. You've got the prequel pod racers where there's just 2 big engines and there's some dude strapped in the middle basically, and he goes flying, and that's exactly what happens with these cards. So the image here, the theme of this one is absolutely perfect. It's so clever. Would it be good? No, but Blizzard prints these kinds of cards all the time, right? Like the Desert Obelisk style card that's like almost never gonna work, but it just exists because it's fun and maybe somebody figures out some ridiculous combo. I'm curious if you can figure out some ridiculous combo with these here Pod Racer engines, because I absolutely love the design of this card. Moving on here to Nala Se from Rob K. It's a 7-mana 4/4 for Priest, and the battle cry reads, if your deck has no duplicates, choose a minion and shuffle 15 copies of it into your deck. So we've got a no duplicate card that is cloning your card, fitting for the character, and adding a bunch of duplicates to your deck. And you might say, well, Regis, that's stupid. If you're running a no duplicate deck, why would you want duplicates? And that's the point, is that there's this cool friction and downside created by the design of this card where you have some decisions to make. Maybe this is just an anti-fatigue card. You get that kind of togwaggle scheme style play where you shuffle 15 really awesome things into your deck. We already have that in Hearthstone today. Doesn't seem particularly broken. Maybe Priest could do more broken things with it. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the balance here. But also, if you play this too early or you feel like you just have to get it down, you're going to break other no duplicate cards into your deck, right? You can't suddenly use your Zephrys or your Dragon Queen Alexstrasza. So you kind of have to wait for this for the right moment. So maybe it's fatigue protection. Maybe you just want to shuffle a bunch of good stuff into your deck. You probably shouldn't shuffle a bunch of Zephyrses in. That's not going to work too well, but you know a ton of people will try it on day one anyway. But this captures the clone mechanic of Star Wars really well. I think this card creates some interesting questions and answers for deck building and how do you play this and how do you structure it, and could take priests in a fun direction with, like, just a long-term anti-fatigue plan. Maybe it's oppressive. I don't think so. I think it's just really cool and fun, but feel free to tell me I'm wrong. Moving on here to Loyal Taunton from a mage old as dirt. A 3-mana 4/3 beast with a death rattle. Give a random friendly minion immune this turn, which of course is a reference to the fact that we had Luke here hiding in the guts of the dead Taunton to protect himself from the cold of Hoth. And that's exactly what happens with this minion, right? Once it dies, I guess another minion burrows up inside of it and protects itself, which is a really cool idea, right? So, for instance, if this is down defensively and you have 2 minions on board, your opponent has to trade in a specific order or they'll mess things up. And maybe that's problematic for them for one reason or another. Maybe you have taunts in the way and their trade order gets all shuffled up and things go wrong, and this creates a lot of friction that gives you some sort of onboard advantage or makes your opponent do something inefficiently. Alternatively, of course, you just have Hunter, who's a class with a lot of rush minions. So if this does stick and you're able to attack with it, you can attack and kill it off and then give a rush or charge minion immune so that they can trade into something for free as well. So I think this one has really cool gameplay incidences that happen both offensively and defensively. Fits the character, if you will, very, very well. So a lot to like about this design. Moving on here to Lord Vader of the Empire from Bahab the Warrior. We had to get a Vader card in here, but there really weren't too many Vaders submitted. I was quite surprised. This one from Bahab's an 8-mana 8/8 with Taunt, following that Lich King style, which certainly seems fitting. They seem to share a lot of similarities. It also has a keyword called Force, which, as explained by Bahab the Warrior here, I didn't want to include all the text, but essentially, if you want to use a Force card like those included on the right side of the screen, you have to have a character on board with Force. So apparently your hero is not gifted in the Force, so you have to have a character to enable Force cards. So, you might have multiples in your deck, certainly not just Vader. And his battle cry will replace spells in your hand with Force cards. And I just included a handful of the Force cards that Bahab had made. He made like 10 different ones. There was like 3 or 4 secrets, some cool stuff. Picked out 3 that looked pretty nifty to me. And I like this idea a lot, right, of giving yourself these resources that are probably somewhat powerful, right? Like Cryokinesis a little better than a Frost Nova, Force Enlightenment, a giant resource generator. They all fit the kind of themes of Jedi and Sith, etc. I think these are mostly Jedi looking, but there were some that were a little more evil too. So anyway, you get perhaps some really powerful resources, but you can only use them some of the time, and you have to build your deck in a specific way to support them, which is really, really cool. So Vader on his own as an 8-mana 8/8 taunt feels good, but if you want to use some of these spells, you might not have that much mana left in that turn. Vader's got to live for a turn. You got to play another Force card. All in all, I think this is a really cool idea of capturing such a big thing in Star Wars, which is the Force, generating these kind of background cards, much like Death Knight cards with Lich King, right? But taking it to another level and expanding on that mechanic and building on it so it's even, maybe like the centerpiece of an expansion. Obviously, we're never going to get a Star Wars expansion, but that's the kind of idea and theme captured here by Bahab, which I thought was really, really cool. So taking something familiar and cranking it up to 11, essentially here for Vader. Next up here, we have Shoot First from Synth and Lasers, and I'll say there were 2 cards that were submitted that were almost identical in this idea. Both 1-mana Paladin Secrets, both a play on Han shooting Greedo before Greedo could shoot him. The wording was a little bit different. I chose this one. I thought just the art and name and the text were a little bit cleaner in how it was executed. This one reads, Secret, when one of your minions is attacked, deal damage equal to its attack to the attacker. So, kind of like Noble Sack or other defensive Paladin Secrets of the sort, but instead of like a 2/1 springing up to attack, the minion would just deal its damage. So if a 4/4 gets attacked, it deals 4 damage to its attacker before it takes that damage, essentially enabling you to kill things perhaps before they register an attack. So in a lot of ways, it operates a bit like Auto Defense Matrix, but technically a little bit different, because if it had 6 health, say, it could still resolve the trade. It wouldn't actually whiff on a Divine Shield. It might still actually just kill that 4/4 minion. So really cool idea for a secret here. Of course, a great play on the whole who shot first meme in Star Wars. Pretty cool idea, and clearly one a lot of people are thinking about. So whoever made that other card, shout out to you. You were close. Just this one got a few things a little bit more right. Next up here, we have Commander Cody from Butterscotch, a 6-mana 4/4 battlecry. Choose an enemy minion, order all friendly minions to attack it. So I like the idea here of a commander of your minion force, right? Ordering your fellow minions to do certain things. And in this case, it's a cool idea where if you have, say, a minion board, 3 or 4 minions that are out there, and they're able to attack, we have a cool situation where you can attack face and then play Commander Cody, target something, and still use your minions to trade in. So you get maybe a little extra face damage. Alternatively, you have a situation where you could play minions simultaneously to Cody, where they're still asleep, essentially, and unable to attack, and then use Commander Cody to kind of functionally give those minions a rush or an instant activation to impact the board instead of having to wait a turn for that attacking initiative. So a couple different ways to squeak out some extra face damage, take some good trades. Now, there are still some awkwardnesses, right? Because it's, not always going to be clean. Sometimes you'll have extra damage that's wasted. Sometimes something will die that you don't want it to die. And there are certain problems there. But nonetheless, I think this is a cool way to empower minions in a slightly different direction. Certainly things like Death Rattles could have some very powerful synergies with a card like Commander Cody. Activating those Death Rattles on command could be really cool. So I like the way this one opens up a couple different lines, allows you to build some decks in some fun ways, and certainly captures the idea of a commander on the battlefield rather nicely. So now we have another here of the Stormtrooper meme cards. Misfire this time around from Magic Milk. 2-mana spell for mage. Choose a minion and deal 2 damage to adjacent minions. So here again, Stormtrooper takes aim, he misses, he fires wildly, and he deals a little damage to other things. So a cool way here to implement some positioning challenges and mechanics into Hearthstone. I still think we need more skillful positioning-based cards instead of so much random stuff. This is a really cool way to do that, right? Just another way to make your opponent have to think about how they're playing minions, making sure they put things in a smart way, and just a great take on Stormtroopers yet again. So a pretty simple card here, but it feels very true to Hearthstone, very realistic, great fit for the theme. So all in all, Magic Milk, simple, but very well executed. All right, before we get into our final card, let's talk about our sponsor for this video. It's Keeps. Because if you don't want to look like Obi-Wan in the original trilogy, but instead are feeling a little more Obi-Wan in the prequel trilogy, I mean, look at that beautiful head of hair, then Keeps might be able to help. If you don't know Keeps, they offer proven treatments that can combat the symptoms of hair loss. It turns out 2 out of 3 guys will low roll when it comes to RNG and experience some form of male pattern baldness by the time they're 35. But thankfully, Keeps makes it easy. They've revolutionized the way men are treated for hair loss. You can visit a doctor online and get medication delivered to your home, which means more time for Hearthstone. Keeps treatments are up to 90% effective at reducing and stopping further hair loss. So if you're on the way to 35 like me, sounds like a pretty good idea. If you're ready to take action and prevent hair loss, go to keeps.com/Regis to receive 50% off your first order. That's keeps.com/Regis. Yeah. I was talking about my good friend Obi-Wan. So of course, here to end the video, we got to finish with Obi-Wan Kenobi from Faroon. This is a 5-mana 5/7 card with a battle cry. Add 3 random side quests to your hand. And I don't know if this was Faroon's intention, but I always felt like Obi-Wan Kenobi in the prequels was just always like going off on some random tangent, some random side quest that was like sort of secondary to the plot. It usually, tied back in some way or another, but he's off on some planet doing something. Nobody really knows what's going on in the prequels. But to me, that's exactly why this card's a great fit for Obi-Wan, just off doing something, and you never really know if it's panning out or if it's going to work, because if you do get 3 random side quests, right, often you're not even going to be able to activate a couple of them. It's stuff that's like, I don't know if I'm ever going to actually get enough rush minions down to do this. I don't really want to hero power that many times. Maybe you eventually spend enough spells to learn Draconic. You probably don't have any elementals or elemental allies, right? So some of these just, it's like you have a chance, some you don't. It's just a mixed bag, right? But there is a lot of upside there if you are able to complete a couple side quests, because Obi-Wan himself, really well statted minion, right? Above vanilla stat line. So there's a lot of upside in this card, right? You get big stats and you get, potential value in hand as well that can turn into some crazy unexpected plays. against your opponent. So I think potentially a very strong card, just one that you'd have to have the right kind of deck to support well. Maybe you do have a couple elementals in there, right? Maybe you do run some rush minions. I guess most decks do anyway. But all in all, a cool way to capture Obi-Wan. I'm sure there's a million different ways to do cool Obi-Wans, but to be frank, not that many people submitted like iconic big characters. Very few like Luke's and Leia's and Han's. Not a lot of Vaders and Obi-Wans. It was mostly like side characters and memes, and a lot of prequel memes in particular. And you know, I could do a whole video on prequel meme cards instead. Not a lot of Mandalorian cards either, which surprised me. So all in all, just, you know, one good way to capture a great character. And this is a card I think would be really fun to see in the game, because who knows what side quests you're going to get. And trying to complete those would be both a pain, but also pretty exciting and hilarious along the way. So that wraps it up. That's it for these custom cards. Really fun design this time around. You know, everybody loves and knows Star Wars really well, so it's fun seeing so many different ideas and mechanics executed in some Hearthstone cards. That said, I'm sure you're curious about next time. Well, for the next card review, we're going to go back to Hearthstone proper, and I want you to make me a Murloc-themed hero card. That's right, a Murloc that's a hero card. It doesn't necessarily have to synergize with traditional Murloc game plans. It just needs to be a Murloc. Maybe it has some Murloc references, maybe Murloc Dragon hybrids. Maybe it's a specific Murloc that does something cool. Just make me a hero card that is a Murloc or connected to Murlocs in some way for the next video. Get the details on submitting that in the description below the stream. That said, thanks again to our sponsor. Thanks so much for watching. Share some thoughts on these cards in the comments below as always. And until next time, game on.
Dragons take flight above the ice and